Cool. I think it's been a couple minutes. We have some people logging in. So if you are joining us live, welcome. We have a couple guests. You probably recognize me and Justin because we're on these all the time. But Chris and Adam are joining us. So if you guys can just introduce yourselves and talk about what you're doing, where you're from. Adam, why don't you start?
Hey everybody, Adam Clark here with Kona Bicycles. I'm in Bellingham, Washington, right here down the road from headquarters. We've all been working from home since March, of course, but world headquarters is right here in Bellingham. And sort of a little background, I'm the Southwest sales rep for Kona in the US. I cover Southern California, Las Vegas, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and El Paso, Texas. And in a normal year, I would be traveling around to events and rides and visiting with all of the accounts and sort of just spreading the love and going out and meeting everybody who's using our bicycles and getting to the staff at our shops. And other than that, it's been a whole lot of this and FaceTime and phone calls and emails back and forth since March, but we're making it work. And it's very, very fortunate that we're in the industry we are.
Nice. Awesome. And Chris from the professional studio showing us all up.
Hey guys, Chris Nolte here from Propel, and I have an e-bike shop. I started in New York. I have a shop in Brooklyn, New York. I moved out to California 2.5 years ago to set up our second shop, and so we have another store in Long Beach, actually not too far down the street from Pedal Movement, and and we do electric bikes, primarily commuter based stuff, commuter cargo. We're really focused on changing the way people move. It's kind of our tagline. And I also have a YouTube channel. It's kind of, you see here, this is like studio setup here. We're really into like educating people about electric bikes and more topics around like mobility and using bikes for transportation. That's like our main focus, because I think we're kind of way behind here in the US. There's a lot of opportunities to really bring us up to speed with some of the other places that are kind of leading this way.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, wow, that's a lot to unpack. I feel like we can just dive into tons of stuff around e-bikes and bike culture in general and what's happening. First of all, I do want to say, if anybody has any questions at any time or any comments, feel free and slap them in the chat or put them in the Q&A and we'll try and address them. But in general, we have, I think, a room of people who are all pretty passionate about bikes. And so we're just going to talk about what can we expect this year. Last year, I think any New Year's resolutions that people made felt pretty silly a few months into the year. And so I don't necessarily want to fall into the same trap of saying everything that we're excited for this year. But I mean, you guys are just, great experts in the industry to kind of have along. And so I think one of the things that people have been asking about a lot this last year was just what's going on with bikes. Like they're so difficult to get. They're months out. Even basic repairs seem like they're taking forever. We've talked a lot about that from Pedal Movement's end, but Chris and Adam, what's it like in your world when it comes to that kind of stuff?
Yeah, Adam, you want to go first or?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. Well, from our perspective, obviously it's a little bit different because we're having to navigate lead times and, international transit of bikes and everything else. But, overall, the conversations that I've been having with dealers and sort of the feedback that we've been getting across the US at least, and even a little bit of Canada, because we still communicate back and forth across the border frequently. And the biggest thing is just that there are so many more people going out and riding bikes. And I mean, it's not only the chatter online, but the chatter in the shops. You can go out on the local trails and see people not only on bikes, but they're out walking their dogs, they're running, they're going for walks, they're just getting outside because they're either, like all of us, working from home, or they've been laid off, their businesses are closed, and they're looking for something to do. And the fortunate thing is, even at the higher end, a bicycle is still relatively inexpensive compared to motorcycles or other motor vehicles, whatever it might be. And it's a easy outlet to go out and sort of free the mind and all the all the lovely things that we're so familiar with bicycles anyway. But it's a trend that people are realizing maybe the old Schwinn that they had collecting dust in their garage is still a very viable option, or at least from what my heavy service shops had been telling me, is that those customers were sort of the first to emerge, if you will, in the early stages of the pandemic. And they got those bikes fixed up, and then they were some of the first to come back and look to upgrade their old bike, or they were buying more upgrade parts to be able to spend more time on it with less headache, that sort of thing. And it's a trend in a positive direction in a big way for the bike industry. That just means a lot more traffic on the trails and a lot more demand on the supply chain.
Yeah, I really like what you hit on with the smaller towns even are really seeing a burst in bikes. I'm in a town of about 5,000, really small farm town, and even they have built a bike lane. I never thought I would have seen this growing up. They put in a new skate park that's BMX friendly. This is stuff that is mind blowing to me. And I feel that everybody is experiencing this across the country and hopefully across the world, where people are really starting to realize that, okay, if we're going to be local and kind of stuck within our own communities, it's good to build them up and improve them, make them more, make things a little bit easier to get across, whether it's bike lanes across the city or just making more outdoor events that aren't so, stuck inside. So yeah, I really like that. That's one of the trends that I've been seeing as well. In a small farm town out in the middle of nowhere, we have a bike lane. We don't have a bike shop yet, so wink, wink, hint, hint to anybody out there. But yeah, we're definitely seeing the change and the growth. So that's a huge part of the culture that I've been loving.
Awesome. Yeah, the momentum's definitely headed in a very positive direction, and obviously Bellingham is a very bike-centric community. The west of the U.S. is a very bike-centric sort of zone, if you will. But even up here, the overall community feel and the response to, say, like in the ballots that we had in November, there was a lot of local stuff for allocating more public funds to developing separate bike lanes, not necessarily just paint on the side of the road. And just within the last year and a half, they've built 2 new pump tracks in town. And you want to call it pump track culture is a huge thing right now. I mean, there's lots of places that are getting funding and grants and dedicating public space to pump tracks. And I mean, it's awesome because that means that there's a safe and secure place for people to go, play with their kids, or the kids can go out and play together. Adults for that matter, like everybody loves pump tracks. But
me? Am I? Yeah, I think what's cool too is like, I feel like a pump track was 10 years ago. You had to be really inside culture to even know where to find one, and it was underground and people were maintaining them and stuff. So the fact that that's like a public place now, I think it's awesome.
A eating place.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool to see kind of those little changes. Chris, you're here in Long Beach with us, and so I'm curious what your kind of take is on what have you seen changing throughout just the last year?
Yeah, I think overall I see, I'm looking at it from Long Beach perspective, and across the country, work with people over, and I have another store in New York. I mean, New York, we've seen probably the most dramatic change because there's so many people that used to commute on the subway, and people don't want to touch it. I mean, you still see relatively high numbers of people using the subway, but the reality is, like, a lot of people want to get away from that. People say, like, overall, this is, I think, something across the board, that there's generally less car traffic, which can make people feel safer, but the reality is actually there can be some dangers with having less car traffic, because cars can potentially travel at a higher rate of speed. So just people need to be mindful of these things. I think that I think that there's other populations of people that are getting out on bikes that we haven't really seen before, which is really great. some other things that I think about in like the commuter space, or kind of relevant to like getting people out of cars and onto bikes. I think that a lot of people working from home, you know, here we have, you know, several people on the call in this specific example, right? And so what that means for a lot of families that there used to be like a 2-car home or something like that. You know, it's, you know, maybe it's less necessary to have 2 cars, and you could potentially live like more of a local lifestyle. It used to be that maybe you were commuting an hour each way to work, and now you're saving those 2 hours. You can afford to take a little bit more time to ride your bike to the supermarket. You can save some money to do that. I mean, yeah, sure, the dining thing is a little up in the air all over the place, but I think that's probably a really big driver as well. Like as some of these, you know, local downtown areas are opening up to more, you know, outdoor dining, like becoming more walkable and that sort of thing. I think that that is ever going to increase the interest in, you know, in biking. But yeah, on the availability note, I mean, it's kind of crazy. It's really unfortunate, but the reality is we could just all be grateful that we're in such a business that that is kind of doing well, all things considered. You know, that's a good problem to have, you know, trouble to actually fulfill orders. Like a lot of businesses are not so fortunate to be in that position. But I think, you know, a lot of times people ask about like, are these trends going to be like here to stay? And I think it's really going to be partly dependent on the infrastructure, which is built out, the culture, which is built out, you know, during this time. And actually, like, you know, getting people out on like quality bikes, because I think the big challenge is like if people have their first experience on a really terrible bike or a bike that's not set up properly for them, like there's a good chance they won't come to the sport, you know, continue to participate. So
yeah, that's interesting. I was even man, this is going to go off topic quick, so I'll keep it short. But looking at like, I was trying out all the new, you know, this last year, Apple released their like cycling directions on Apple Maps. And so I tried it out because I was curious, and it routed me like this bizarre way through my neighborhood. And I'm like, okay, fortunately, I'm a seasoned enough cyclist that I can just decide I kind of know what I'm looking for in a route. But if that was somebody's first ride, I'd be like, dude, they would never want to ride a bike again. Like you just took them like up and over some crazy hill. They took you on to like, you made a right turn and then a U-turn to get across. It was weird. So sorry, not like trashing Apple or anything. I've also had some really good experiences with them, but just speaking to that, like that people's first impression on a bike, I think is really important. That's something we try and tell them at the shop too, you know, is.
Definitely. We actually got a question that said, when things start to open up a little bit, do you think that there's going to be kind of a surplus of bikes since there's been such an influx of production to try to keep up? Is there a chance that like maybe there's going to be kind of a surplus when people stop riding as much whenever things open up again? Or do you think that the culture will stay strong enough to where it'll keep fueling the business?
At least from what we've been seeing, and that again, the conversations is mostly just this sort of setting where, you know, it's an open table type discussion with a dealer or one of our ambassadors, friends in the industry, whatever it might be, is that I don't think it's going to lose much. There might be some trends back towards, okay, well, it's a rainy, cold January day in Bellingham, and I don't want to ride my bike across town to get a burger, so we're going to drive.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing, I don't think is going to really have much of an influx or, you know, influence, I should say, one way or the other. But with the trend and the momentum in the industry, I don't really foresee it slowing down a bunch, because with the difference in work structures and school structures, even if the public space is starting to open up, that doesn't mean that everybody's just going to automatically go back to the office and start the same 9 to 5 sitting in traffic like they always had.
Right.
And
true.
The habits that have formed, whether it's exercise habits on the weekend or commuting to get your groceries on a bike or, you know, a one wheel or whatever it might be, we see a ton of that stuff around. And, you know, that's what people have gotten used to. And it's not like it was a 3-week thing. We're going on this for almost a year now. And it's obviously, knock on wood, we hope that everything gets a lot better quickly. but I don't think it's going to change that drastically that soon. And even if we were to be able to flip a light switch and have everything back to quote unquote normal, or what we were used to before, most of those people are still going to be going out and using the investment that they've already made, or the people that have set their sights on getting a new bicycle are just going to be excited that their local shop has the ability to special order one and get it in a much shorter time frame, or ideally in a perfect world, they'll have it on the floor.
Yeah. And I think that with the way that people's lives have adapted, I think you're right. And Chris mentioned earlier, I think once people have like seen that commute to work is like doable through a bike, whether you're, you know, pedaling, you know, a couple miles, or you hop on an e-bike and you're, you know, zooming 10 miles down the, you know, down the path or something. It's seen so many positive benefits that going back to the old way might not even be practical at this point. So yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah, that's what I've been just looking at, a lot of the macro trends just outside of like COVID, like what has this COVID shift changed? And, you know, it's all these things have been kind of spoken about a lot, but like, you know, even if people go back to the office, there's a lot of times that people, maybe it's only going to be 2 or 3 days a week or something like that. There's like a lot of these sort of shifts. Like I think about, you know, the remote working shift has happened, and the infrastructure that's kind of put in place in order to actually facilitate that, those costs have already been sunk. So it's like these organizations are better to take advantage of them. You know, before, a lot of times people didn't want to actually, you know, a lot of these companies, they didn't want to put in that initial cost, the initial time, the initial loss in efficiency of moving people remote. But once you actually do that and you work out some of those efficiencies, which these companies have been forced to do, I think we're going to see that that's going to continue. So, you know, I think this working from home trend is a really big one, which is going to, from my perspective, is really going to push that like living local lifestyle, which really lends itself well to riding a bike. A lot of times people, you know, when I talk to people all the time, like they say like, oh, well, I'd love to ride a bike, but my commute is too far. Or, you know, another one that comes up quite a bit is like, oh, well, what about the scenario when I have to go grocery shopping or I have to like carry something big? And, you know, there are cargo bikes available for that sort of thing, but maybe if you have a longer ride with the cargo bike, maybe you don't want to do it or whatever. But those interesting things. And I know we touched a little bit on the health thing, but I think that, I know for me personally, certainly this has like made me reevaluate a lot of choices I have about my health. I think people are looking at their mortality a lot deeper these days, you know. You know, especially older people, they say, wow, you know what, like I can go from being this like very vulnerable person, that I can die from this thing, or if I improve my health a little bit, maybe I can, you know, live through, you know, having this and not have much trouble. So, and a bike's a good way to get there, right?
Definitely. Definitely improve the lungs, definitely improve the overall just endurance to fight. So yeah, and that's something I didn't even think about either. It's just in general, your healthcare in times like this, where it is going to be a trend for people to be factoring cycling into their healthcare and into their future wellness. So that is definitely a key component.
Yeah. Chris, you mentioned really quick talking about cargo bikes, and that's been something that you know, a lot. There've been like little documentaries. There've been people thinking cargo bikes could revolutionize cities if people decided to integrate them. And you know, we've even had conversations about how to integrate them into things like bike share, where if you don't want to own one, like, but you could use one to do a trip like that. I know you have quite a bit of experience in cargo bikes. Adam, I'm sure you have something to contribute too, but like what are cargo bikes going to do? Do you think that's a trend that's going to take off? Is that here to stay? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, I think we're seeing this big trend of like people starting to replace their cars, or potentially maybe if they're not replaced, they're not going completely car free. Maybe they're a 2-car family and they're going to go down to 1 car. And a traditional bike might not necessarily address all the needs that somebody might have. You know, if you have kids, like maybe you could carry 1 kid, but as they get older, you can't carry them anymore on the bike, and maybe you don't feel safe them riding on their own, or maybe you have 2 kids and you can't carry on the traditional bike. So the idea, the opportunity to potentially be able to use a bike specially made to carry kids or to carry the additional cargo. So you don't have to have a car just for those grocery runs or whatever the case may be. You know, so we're seeing that as a big trend in specifically in the electric space. One thing, a big thing that we've seen in New York is that New York City, it's kind of difficult to own like a nice bike because you don't have a place to keep it. Or if you don't have a place to keep it, I mean, more and more there's like bike parking. This is a whole nother discussion, but basically what we're seeing is people are willing to kind of jump through some of the hoops of owning a bicycle because a cargo bike can provide them that much more utility. You know, so it's like, well, I kind of need to have this. It's going to provide all this additional utility. So I'm willing to go through the extra thing to find some place to put it, you know, be a little bit concerned about theft, which, you know, our general recommendation is just get good locks and get insurance, and, you know, and you kind of leave the rest up to fate, you know. Unfortunately, too many people are really limited in their ability to use a bike because of the theft concern. And that's another, I don't know, hopefully I mean, I see some small, you know, indications of moving in more like secure bike parking and that sort of thing. LA, there's a lot of that kind of going on or being talked about. But I think that that's going to be a really critical piece in order to really shift it, you know, people from just like the bike ownership and like using it recreationally and actually using it for transportation in a similar fashion. Yeah, cargo bike share is amazing because actually when you think about it, a lot of times people might only need to use it once a week or those special scenarios. It's like every other time traditional bike makes sense, but in that like once a week scenario, like, yeah, to be able to use the bike for the big grocery run or the, you know, special whatever. Yeah, so we're super interested in this, and I think that that's going to be a really big thing as we move forward. Especially Americans, like we like to have a lot of stuff, so like having something bigger to carry our stuff, I guess. I don't know.
If anyone's going to make a bigger cargo bike, it's going to be Americans. You know?
Right. Got to go to Sam's Club, you know.
Yeah, I think another thing that we've encountered a lot, at least at our shop this year, is people coming in for wanting to do what should be a basic repair. Let's say getting a new inner tube, and even inner tubes this year is like, I'm sorry, 26-inch. Yeah, I know it's the most common size. We don't have them. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
And so some of the advice that we've given people is like, your best bet to be getting something is like, one, come in with a really specific idea of exactly what you want, is going to help for starters, and then be really willing to kind of go for whatever's available. And for a lot of people, it's like, okay, if you want something really high end, the availability is maybe there, but you're spending a lot more money. And so you just have to choose where on that continuum you want to land. But people are tired of hearing our advice. And so what do you guys have for people of like, what's the best way to navigate this, aside from just patience, I think?
That's the biggest thing that I've noticed, is that it's an easy keyword to default back to, but patience is huge. Not only from a consumer's perspective, if they're coming in looking for a repair. So if they, you know, break their chain and they realize that it's going to be a while before they can get a new one, you know, it's an unfortunate reality, but it's the reality that we're in. And the background, at least that I've been able to understand and communicate a little bit forward, is that it's not necessarily just bicycle products, but it gets all the way down to the raw material availability and the transport of that to wherever the origin of that product might be. So just, this is a total digression, but I was shopping for a new fridge a couple weeks ago, and, you know, I have never bought a fridge. This is, you know, something totally new for me.
Right.
And, you know, I ended up going with one that was a scratch and dent on the sales floor, because the lead time on a new fridge was 8 months on certain models.
What?
Wow.
For, you know, appliances, like who would have thought, right? And so the guy at the appliance shop, we had an interesting conversation, sort of, you know, cross industry, and we were like, oh wait, we're both sort of dealing with almost the exact same conversations for completely different reasons. And, you know, the best thing that I've noticed from the intercommunication between my shops is that, they've flat out gone to the model of wanting to communicate with their staff, but also with their customers of, look, we're not going to start with no. Like whenever you call us and say, hey, do you have this? Can I get this? No. Okay, fine. Click. And then everybody's upset.
Yep.
But sort of, it's sales 101, but trying to communicate what can happen and when it can happen. Even if at the end of the conversation, the answer is no.
Yeah.
you're going to talk that person off the ledge a lot quicker. And, in turn, they'll come back to that shop in 6-8 months, or they'll understand that, cool, well, I can't get this right now, but I'll be patient. I appreciated the conversation that I had with, bike shop employee A at my local shop, or, we even get consumer calls right at Kona, and, some people are really grumpy, and so other people are happy we picked up the phone. So.
Yeah, that positivity will go a long way as far as like dealing with those kind of issues, because being on like both sides as somebody who's sold bikes and somebody who's like been shopping for bikes or just whatever, it is like as a bigger guy, I hear a lot of no's as far as like, do you have this size kind of thing? And so it really is nice to hear that, maybe we don't have it now, but in the meantime, somebody in the chat even mentioned like adding different accessories to your bike. So you can even start working on accessorizing your bike before you get it. Like things like that I've seen people do at our shop, where it's like, yeah, your bike's gonna be a week, but in the meantime, what else were you wanting to do with it? And then by the time it comes in, you got your tires ready, you got whatever, a new brake system, even if you're wanting to do different colors on your cables. It's just really a very fulfilling experience, and you could have just walked away with a no, and most people would have. But if you're that kind of salesperson, and if you're committed to adding more people to the bike community, yeah, you're gonna let that person know the options, and don't just give them a no, but give them a what can we do for you, So I definitely dig that.
It's all an effort. We're all in it together.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think just overall, it just needs to be like more communication and that sort of thing. I think the reality is there might be a lot of these things that people don't necessarily know what's going on, but we do our best to like kind of keep the communication flowing through the lines. I think leveraging technology is great. I mean, this is a great example of that, where just like, okay, like give people an opportunity to get a insight actually, like what is going on, why are these things happening. I know we're right here in Long Beach, and the port is right here, and apparently the port's like totally jammed up. And one of the biggest things it's been jammed up with is home improvement stuff. So a lot of these trends that we're seeing, there's kind of these like parallel industries, like, yeah, more people are working from home. Now they want to improve their space. Those goods have to be very big, there's a lot of these things that tend to, end up pushing a lot of that stuff out. So, talking with a lot of our vendors are like, well, even when it arrives at the port, we can't get a truck to actually pick it up because they don't have the trailers available to put the bike, the container on. Wow. And then, as you spoke about before, like there's a lot of these dependencies, because we live in a global marketplace, right? So, and I don't think any of us could have ever anticipated or expected the scenario where it's like, okay, yeah, this whole country is going to be shut down, and we can't get anything from that country for this extended period of time. And how that one little, I mean, it could be as little as like a screw is going to change the whole production on this whole bicycle. And I think that those sort of scenarios are existing, and they continue to exist. I think a lot of these companies are reevaluating their strategies around that stuff. But yeah, you'd be surprised how such a small thing can have such a dramatic impact on on the production of a bicycle.
Yeah, that's wild. I think it's definitely, I think, good just for people hearing now, people hearing later, just being able to hear that like we're just as frustrated as everybody else. We're having to be just as patient too. Like we're all inventing solutions for the first time. I think you put it so simply of like, yeah, no one could have expected that an entire country would be shut down. So it's not in the training manual for how to move forward.
Right. Yeah, my parents out here in Illinois were actually in the middle of home improvement, and it's the same way where the price of wood, which always been like pretty low as far as like, and especially being out here where it's like you can almost get it like it's not being transported miles and miles. It is now insane. I trying to get a shed built, like a big garage was just last year, and I wish my parents would have hit the gas on it, but you know, they were moving things around, and then we tore down the old garage, and now what was going to be under 10,000 is looking at closer to $28,000 for a basic. I mean,
you brought up a great point. Yeah.
And this was something that was going to be a pop-up like prefab. This wasn't going to be built on site with laborers. This was a prefab, and everybody's like essentially tripling their prices. So the fact that bike companies aren't really taking advantage of people in a predatory way like that, I think is another reason why people are drawn towards the bike culture too, because it is very much like, you know, you'll have to wait, but that bike isn't, they're not going to flip on you and turn into almost like a housing situation where you're like, oh, this is based on the market in that way. Like, it's not just you know, so like I said, you know, bikes they're good financially as well as for your health and everything else. And I think that that's why they're trending up, you know, and hopefully we'll keep trending up.
Yeah, that kind of that thing that you brought up about the wood is a great point, because apparently that comes from hoarding. Well, apparently, from my understanding, that somebody actually purchased like the large majority of lumber, and they're actually charging a premium for it. So that's actually part of what's going on there, and why the price of lumber went up so significantly.
Wow.
It's like 2.5x the normal price. So like everything goes up. And I think that probably exists on some level in the bike industry as well, where some companies might be like, you know, kind of taking more than what they necessarily need. And there's kind of all this like weird stuff going on. So yeah, it's an unfortunate reality, but that is something that seems to go on.
That's wild. I want to shift gears a little bit and go, you know, so obviously everything we're about to say has an asterisk of like, we don't really know when things will be available or what's going to happen. But looking back, I would say that 2010 to 2020 was like the age of the gravel bike becoming a thing. And I feel like it's just only getting, maybe we're at the peak. I would guess we're maybe at the peak, but perhaps it is only up and up. Maybe we're just at the beginning. But if you were to look forward of like 2020 to 2030, where's it going? Like, what's the next big thing? Is there any Kona secrets that you can hint at? Is there any e-bike technology you know it's coming around the corner? Whoever wants to start. Justin, you didn't know I was going to ask this question either, so like
I didn't. I'm very anxious to hear what the juicy secrets. Here we go.
The best thing that I can sort of share, if you will, I can't dive too far into it, but as far as anything that we're seeing and sort of planning over the next 3 to 5 years, is that there's going to be certain trends that have been consistent in the past that might start coming back. And you know, the over categorization of bicycles, of, you know, this bike has this really narrow window, I feel like that might be kind of going down. And there's going to be a bit of a resurgence of, look, let's just go for a bike ride. And, you know, I don't want to say everybody, but lots more people have a bicycle now. It might be a hardtail mountain bike. It might be a gravel bike. It might be a cross bike. You know, it might be a commuter that's got slightly knobby tires on it. Like, there's all these things that people are trying to accomplish with the bicycle that they have, given the demand and, you know, lead time on certain upgrades or conversions this year. And, you know, they want to go ride with their friends. And if that means, you know, taking out a dew and going and riding some single track with your buddy on a drop bar bike, then sure. Like, that's what people have gotten used to. And I feel like that's going to be maybe more consistent going forward, of not having so many categories, but producing a functional piece of equipment that will satisfy a lot of different categories. And obviously that's not going into a very niche market, say in the full suspension mountain bike category, because that's a whole nother can of sardines we can talk about on another call. But for the general, if you just want to call the umbrella of cycling, I feel like there's going to be an adoption of, look, I just want a bicycle that I can go out and enjoy riding 7 days a week, 365 days a year, if I so choose. And you won't be pigeonholed into saying, oh, well, I don't want to buy a cyclocross bike because I'm not a racer, or I don't want to buy a gravel bike because I don't want to ride in the gravel. That scares me. And it's just going to be a bicycle. I think that's going to be a direction we'll all head.
We have a message saying, like, co-signed, totally agree with you. Like, he's Nick, who works for us too, is saying he keeps looking at buying more bikes, and then he comes back to his rigid gravel cross drop bar bike, and he's like, that's it. A lot of us have kind of been
behind right here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same trend that we're seeing in the e-bike space. I mean, a lot of times people come in and they're like, they're like, okay, I want a bike to ride on the beach path. And I'm like, okay, you sure you don't want to ride anywhere else with that bike? And basically that's one thing we really try to encourage people to think about, what the possibilities are, and to try to get something that's going to be versatile and really get the most utility out of it, right? And especially as I think that people are looking to, the reality, I guess, when you look at it, as the bike market and electric bike market has gotten bigger, there's a lot more pricey bikes in the market, if you will. Like, it's, the quality is improving and all these sort of things, and at times they can be more expensive. So if you're going to make that investment, you're better to make an investment that's going to last long term for you. And and I'd say, well, oftentimes I ask people, well, you're going to also maybe like visit this other place, and you might be riding off-road a little bit. And I think this kind of like on off-road, just go anywhere, do anything. Yeah, you're not like, I think that covers like such a wide cross section of the population that it's just like, I just want to go out and have fun, and I don't want to be limited to where I can go with it. I don't want to like do 10-foot drops with my bike. That's not going to happen. But I just want to go out with my friends and enjoy myself, and say, oh, I can't go with you on that trip because I don't have the appropriate bike for like that's. So that's a big thing that we talk about. But overall, like, one of the big trends that I just see is that the commuter and like electric bike market, cargo bike market, frankly, I mean, I'm going to say something a bit controversial, but I anticipate it's going to be way bigger than the bike market overall. Like the actual like electric bike, because this is the way I look at it, is if you think about the bicycle market and then you think about the transportation market is so much larger than the bike market. It's just like you can't even really fathom it, right? And if you think about electric bikes or commuter bikes, really is like a portion of that. It changes everything, really. And I think that a lot of times people say like, oh yeah, how many electric bikes, compared to the regular bike market, like, are we going to see in the future, and this and that. But I think the reality is, and actually I think the trend this year has shown that like there's just been way more interest in that specifically. And I think that's going to continue to be the case, particularly once we see more infrastructure. I think that's one of the single biggest pieces. It's like, if you build it, they will come. I mean, like, that's a dramatic thing. And and as some people mentioned before, Justin, I think you were mentioning that it's like, if the infrastructure is not complete, it's kind of pointless. Like, and so like these different cities or whatever else, they put in bike lanes and they just like suddenly end, or it's not part of a complete network. It's just like, you're wasting your time. I mean, like, it's a good gesture, but the reality is, like, I mean, Long Beach kind of has this issue that there's not that many north-south routes, so it's like, as much as there's a lot of these like east-west routes, like, to actually fully like get around in the city, you kind of have to like cut it up with traffic some more. And for the average novice cyclist, like, that's not, so I think that that's probably going to be the big driver. So I think the cities that do invest in infrastructure in the years to come, like they're going to see a dramatic growth in cycling. Like that's right. And whether it's pump tracks or mountain bike, you know, trails or whatever the case may be, like that's so critical.
And I think also, like, to go along with that, just educating people on the existing infrastructure. We've had little events as a company, Pedal Movement, with the city, where we would have like a grand opening of a new bike path or a new bike lane. And whenever we would do that, it was also part of letting people know, especially for the children in the area, like this is a safer path whenever you're, you know, riding with your friends to school. And so part of that is the education, getting people to the hub downtown where we give out free maps so that people, you know, maps are something that should be hung up in everybody's room, just kind of like how, you know, you should grow up having a globe. It's just one of those things where, you know, you don't think it's a big deal, but if you look at it every day, eventually you'll just be able to do it. And hopefully we can get that trend going. That's kind of a small trend that we're trying to get going as well as a company is, you know, getting those maps out there, getting into schools. Not so much now because of COVID, but we can still do, you know, virtual and, you know, just talk to these kids about safe travel. And once you get that confidence and you get that level of safety and like one of you mentioned earlier, getting, I believe it was Adam, getting the actual protected lanes versus just paint on the ground, that's really going to build that confidence, not just in yourself, but in the community. Cars will respect you more when they have damage that can be done to their car if they hit you, because as you know, as twisted as it sounds, there are people that just don't think about cyclists as humans until you give us the kind of ability to damage their vehicles. Then it's like, oh, you are a person in a vehicle. You're just on two wheels. So we just need to build that up. Somebody just passed away recently in the community in a hit and run. These are things that we got to tackle. And as a community, if we keep educating and keep building up that infrastructure, it's going to happen less. And, you know, people will be more aware of our existence, you know?
Absolutely. And the best news based on the past handful of months and so many more people on bikes is that we've got that many more voices in their own neighborhoods that can go out and, you know, make those requests, attend those meetings, and sort of to touch back on the e-bike thing, somebody who may have never been quote unquote a cyclist before is now a bicycle enthusiast, whether they know it or not. Because a lot of those folks may have never considered going out and having to pedal a bicycle, an analog bike, to, you know, go out for exercise or whatever. But now this e-bike thing is a whole new fun adventure because they're still getting just as much, if not more, exercise than they would on an analog bike. But they're not thinking of it as exercise. They're thinking of it as transportation. They're using it as an alternative to a vehicle, or, you know, they're flat out adopting a two-wheeled device as something to do because of the fact that it's an e-bike, and they're not thinking of it as a, you know, a child's toy that hangs in the garage.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
exactly.
you know, they've got a little skin in the game because e-bikes aren't cheap, let's face it, and they want to use it. So, you know, what better way to go out and really leverage that momentum in all of our neighborhoods to, you know, have better bike lanes, to have better infrastructure, at least at the very bare minimum, have more awareness in the communities, to where if you had no bike lanes before and they paint a stripe on the road, maybe your neighbor who's driving his car will think twice next time he's, you know, out and sees somebody ride on the road. Just one step at a time, one step at a time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, that's I mean, we could really dive into the infrastructure and accountability and just city management, you know, all of it. It is one step at a time. I think that's the best way to put it.
And we're thankful to be in Long Beach too, because they are far more progressive than so many places I've seen whenever it comes to the bike culture, supporting the local businesses, trying to make sure that, you know, the bike share hubs are in areas to get business going there, making sure that the lanes are passing through places, making sure that like places like Cambodia Town, where whenever you have beach streets, it's an event that the city does. We'll talk a little bit about that later, maybe, but really slows you down and lets you see the community and lets you see that, oh, I didn't even know there was this store here, there is this restaurant there, it's right around the corner from you. But, you know, when you're on PCH or when you're on Anaheim, you know, you're just flying by. But, you know, once we have an event where we can really get people out on their bikes, people out on their skates and on their boards, you see the city in a whole different way. And I think that that's going to be another part of the trend that's going to continue to go up and people are going to stick with cycling, is because they now see their city in a different way where they're like, wow, maybe I've lived here for 10, 20 years, literally haven't seen it at 5-10 miles an hour. And once you see that, you're like, this place is way bigger than I thought it was. And maybe I don't need to always go to LA to get something that was in this little shop right around the corner, you know? So hopefully that's a trend that we can keep doing. We'll, you know, whenever we talk about events, we'll talk about that a little bit too. But yeah, just hopefully spread the good word of cycling through just casual shopping and, you know, slowing life down a little bit, you know?
It's a whole different sensory experience because you can see it, you can feel it, you can smell it. You know, it's not like you're sitting in your car with the seat coolers on at a you know, perfect 70 degrees with the AC.
I've ridden my bike by so many restaurants before, and I was like, let me go ahead and pull a little, you know, cruise on the sidewalk, see where that is, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm all about that. I'm all about that. As soon as I smell it, I'm like, let me stop. Because in the car, you're not getting that. On the bus, definitely not getting that.
Yeah. Yeah, my street taco budget has gone up since I started riding my bike more.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's just random spots that you'll be riding by and you're like, there's no way I would have seen that. There's just no possible way. And Long Beach is full of places like that, where it's like literally a little mom and pop shop where they have some of the best tacos, but it's right on PCH. So unless you're on a bike, you're not gonna catch it, you know? And that's an unfortunate thing that I think the bike culture, it battles naturally. It doesn't even have to go out of its way to make things better. It just naturally does it. Just like improving your health, it also can improve local business and commerce if you just allow people to be seen, you know?
Totally.
One other quick side note on that, you know, one of the things that was, I was at a meeting a couple of years ago and we were talking about a bike lane, you know, being put into a certain neighborhood. And what it was spoken about is that actually can increase the safety as well. So like, you know, like you said, like eyes on the street. So actually like people riding by, like, you know, there's been a lot of crazy things that have happened this past year and years prior. So like actually having people out there, you know, actually like aware in the community, it's helpful because you're driving by in a car or whatever, you don't see what's going on, you don't hear what's going on. But you know, it might be the case, and maybe you don't necessarily stop, but you like hear something, you can call somebody or whatever the case may be. I don't know, just something to think about. It's kind of interesting.
That's a great point. I had not considered that, but it's just more people out on the street instead of drowning out their existence with music or a car or whatever it is.
It's true.
So again, I'm not asking anybody to be like a fortune teller here, but we do want to talk a little bit about what events could look like this coming year in 2021. So maybe this is a 1-minute conversation where we all say, I don't know, but that's probably the actual nuts and bolts of it. But there are, like, USA Cycling has a pretty full schedule of events for 2021 that they're, at least as of right now, being like, you can still register for these. We're still going to kind of move forward with them. And they all have an asterisk next to them of, you know, maybe. But yeah, I know, like, on the Kona website, you guys have your demo tour is kind of indefinitely on hold. Chris, I am not as familiar with kind of, you know, the events that Propel would do or has been involved in, but what's the lay of the land? Like, what are people hoping for this year? Best case scenario, and, you know, preparing ourselves for the worst, that it might be the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I think we have a big challenge because, you know, the best way for somebody to experience this product is to actually ride it, right? So to not have that opportunity through these different events and demo events, I mean, that's the biggest thing I think that generally happens in the bike scene outside of like races and tours and whatever else, which is another, you know, challenge in like bringing those communities together. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. Honestly, you know, for us, we just kind of been leaning into like as much digital stuff as possible, as much like digital community building, connections, etc. I think that we'll probably continue to see more of that. I was, you know, these kind of like virtual races or scavenger hunts. I think that that's super cool to like lean into some of those different technologies. I know that some of these like events have happened. I don't, you know, yeah, but I have that's kind of all that I know or aware of it at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, we're last year for Bike Month in May, we did a virtual the Pedal Movement Ride Challenge, which we had a bunch of people sign up for and do, and it was all you just ride, whether it's on a trainer, out solo, maybe with, you know, whoever your roommate is or who you live with. But yeah, just logging all the miles and everything. We are planning on doing that again this year. At least something similar. You know, we got to adjust the prizes, got to adjust the qualifications and stuff. But that's what we're planning on. And, you know, we still have people are asking all the time about Moonlight Mash, the every full moon ride, which we all miss greatly. And so far that still isn't coming back. Our kind of go-to answer is just when it's safe, when we feel confident that we're not going to endanger anybody, then we can move forward with it. But we don't have a date yet for that.
We still encourage people to do it on their own though. Like, you know,
Yeah,
nothing stopping you from going out at any random time and doing that ride. Those streets are always there. But yeah, like Aaron was saying, definitely we're wanting to wait until we know everything is safe and you know, everybody's in good health and, you know, but we do miss it dearly. That was almost one of the ways that I knew like what time it was in a weird sense. Like once the ride came up, I was like, oh, it's been another month. That's cool. Like, you know, it's strange, but it was definitely one of those things that was very big in the community. If you've ever seen us in Long Beach riding, you know, anywhere from 100 to, you know, 200-300 people, like it can get pretty big. And I'm hoping after this all clears up and we can get back to riding, it's going to be even bigger. And, you know, yeah, we just got to stay patient. Patient is the key word for the past year.
Oh,
so
totally.
What we're doing.
Adam, can you talk at all about anything that's coming up with Kona demo tour stuff? Is there, I mean, it's still just on hold?
Pretty much. I mean, we're much more on the idea of erring on the side of caution. That's one of the reasons that, you know, all of us that live here in Bellingham are still working from home. I mean, we very well could go into the office. We've got the space to be able to separate. And, you know, there's been a handful of times that we've gone in if we, you know, physically need to go put hands on something in the warehouse. But, you know, we're much more like, look, it's gonna come back, but we're not in a rush. We don't want to, you know, dive into it and put any of our staff, any of our dealers, and of course, any of the consumers or, you know, folks that would be wanting to come and demo a bike, be, you know, at an event or, you know, somebody at our demo tours, whatever it might be. We don't want to push it if we don't have to. It's not that we couldn't. We just would prefer not to. And it's a very similar conversation that I've been having with a lot of my accounts, that if they have a demo program, it's very, very limited. They're not just sending out rentals for the sake of sending out rentals. And it's for everybody's safety, really. The best thing I can think of is that as far as events go, not necessarily with demos specifically, but I feel like there is going to be some availabilities to adapt, whether it might be local races or, you know, at the state or regional level type thing, particularly with, you know, say more like an alley cat type structure, on the urban type environments, or if you're out in the mountain bike trails, you know, like a local Strava Enduro type thing could be a very safe event, because of the fact that everybody can ride it at their own pace. People aren't grouping together. You know, you can go one at a time. You can control the amount of people that are, you know, in one given area at a time. And, you know, we're all crafty people. We want to ride together. We want to go out and do all the stuff we used to, but
Yeah.
you know, there's certain adaptations that can and need to be made until things start to get back to where, you know, the promotions for something like the Sedona Mountain Bike Fest can happen and say, look, guys, we're going to be there in 4 months. Spread the word, come one, come all. Let's all go out and, you know, do all the things we're normally used to doing.
Yeah, I like how you said we're all crafty. It's like, we'll figure it out. We'll do something, you know.
Yeah, and it'll happen. It'll come back. But you know, we're not in any rush. I'll tell you that for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just real quick from my side. I mean, you know, some of the stuff that you guys talked about, like some of these adaptations and that sort of thing. I think that the bottom line is like, yeah, like although we can't all connect like physically so much right now, the same way that we used to, I think that people still have this yearning to connect and to be part of this community. So I think it's kind of our job in some ways to like foster that opportunity. And I think the bike month thing that you guys did last year is amazing. And you know, I think, you know, as Adam, you were talking about some of these different adaptations, like I think the reality is a lot of this stuff might not necessarily come back anytime soon. So to, you know, for us to, you know, maybe continue to foster some of these opportunities to build community and give people opportunities to connect. As Justin said, like, yeah, we still encourage people to go out and check out the moon, and like maybe just to like use the hashtag of like Moonlight Mash, or you know, or like, you know, some opportunities to like share photos and like just to connect with people, because people, I think people need that. I know that I need that. And like, this is my tribe, right? And like, I want to do that. So I think that that's really something that we need to do more of. I mean, I know that you guys do an amazing job, like at Pedal Movement. Kona, I don't know as much, you know, I know and respect you guys, but I know I have more of a personal connection to Pedal Movement. And I know that like you guys have always done an amazing job at community building. So like, and you know, I guess this sort of thing on its own is that as well. But I think, you know, just thinking of some additional creative ways to continue to build on that and to give people an opportunity to connect. And, you know, so as you know, in the future, you are still kind of continue to build that community that people are really yearning for. And actually, that's the one other thing that I do want to mention, just in relation to bikes. You know, we talked about like bike commuting and stuff like that. For a lot of people, their first time, it's a really scary thing, right? And to not have people to talk to, or to, you know, or to communicate with. And it's like, you know, we deal with this a lot, where I have a parent that bought a bike. They live in downtown LA, and they bought a cargo bike. And all their friends and like all the kids at school, or like the parents at school, were like, you're crazy. What are you doing? You're putting your kids in danger, all this sort of thing. And, you know, to not have other like kind of informed people that understand that, hey, like there are safe ways to do this. This is not a ridiculous idea. And, you know, and that sort of thing, to like make those connections. So I think that's generally the thing that events used to do. So like maybe to find additional ways to continue to, you know, create that connection. I mean, that to me, I think is a really important detail I'd love to see more of. And I feel like I'm just a reminder for me to work more on that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm right there with you. It's all, whether you like it or not. I think, Adam, you kind of touched on this too, of like, whether you're just diving in, dipping your toe for the first time into an e-bike, like it's the culture, it's the people who are doing it with you, I think, that are going to really keep people invested. And it's up to us whether the bike boom continues. I think it's up to people staying passionate about it.
Especially now, probably, I mean, definitely more than ever in the past, through, you know, my 15-year tenure in the outdoor industry, the barrier of entry is probably lower than it ever has been. And obviously there's part of it because there's so many more people. Everybody's like, yeah, you know, come on, my neighbor got a bike, let's go out and ride. Or, they're exploring it because they're seeing more people on bikes. But I feel like the camaraderie capability that we have currently is massive. And the fact that these kinds of conversations are happening, there's more and more people that are trying to get creative, whether it's, say like my aunt, for instance, she doesn't have a really great infrastructure around her house to go and ride safely. So she invested in a Peloton. And I know that's not a bicycle specific thing, but it's the same mindset, same mentality. And she's just as into it as any of us would be to go out and ride on the street or ride on the trails. And to her, that's been a huge outlet, because now she's got a sort of self-monitored type progression with her own athletics or fitness, well-being, whatever you want to call it. But it's also the camaraderie of, look, I'm going to go for a pedal. And, she walks upstairs to her office and goes to a pedal instead of, taking her bike downstairs and going out and riding for 45 minutes. And that amount of, feel good and people wanting to talk about the riding, whether it's Strava or Peloton, or, sending a screenshot of your Garmin to a neighbor of, look what I went and did, here's what I did on the trail last night. Like, any of this stuff, I think is going to be hugely helpful for somebody who might be leery about getting into it, or nervous, or like, oh, well, I can't go out and, spend $2,000 on a bike because I'm not that serious about it. Like, it's not a racer's game anymore. It's not a, elite type club unless you want to seek that out. And I think before, it may have been sort of the default go-to was, oh, well, I'm not a cyclist. I don't want to be associated with a cycling type thing. But now it's just, hey, I want to ride my bike, and there's lots of people riding their bike. So why would I be nervous about it?
Exactly.
Couldn't have said it better. That's a great summation. Anyone watching who isn't into biking, that's the commercial right there. That's it. That's what the community is all about, man.
Sure.
Man, well, okay, I could continue talking with you guys forever, but we're pretty much right at that hour mark. So if there's any last, I just wanted to be able to open it up to you guys, of even just personally, like, what are you excited about, whether it's this week or this year, whatever it is for you personally on your bike? That might be a good way to close it out. Whoever wants to start. Justin, you start. I don't even know this answer for you.
Okay. What am I excited about for this year on my bike? Personally, I want to, get in more miles. I want to hopefully get more of my family into cycling. My mom never learned how to ride a bike, and she's very stubborn. And just the other day, she came up to me and mentioned wanting to ride a tricycle to the grocery store. And my heart was like, yo, like, that is huge, because she has been thinking more about her health. As Chris mentioned earlier, people are factoring that into their health. And, she saw that I lost a little bit of weight. She's seen other people around town riding more, and she's felt inspired. And I feel like that's part of what the community vibe is. So definitely for this next year, is to get my mom on a bike, get more of my family members on a bike. I've had family members reach out to me when I make bike posts, and they're like, oh, you ride bikes? I'm like, I'm kind of into bikes. And they're like, yeah, me too. So connecting with family members I haven't talked to in years that are into bikes or wanting to buy a bike through our company. And I'm just like, this is community, this is family. So that's hopefully what I'm going to be doing this next year, is hooking up my family with bikes and getting everybody out there.
Love it. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, so for me this year, I mean, for me, I got into this thing with the vision for like the future of what biking will be and how that can kind of transform communities and people, and what I've seen. And I'm just most excited that, like, how that's accelerating with everything that's going on. It's unfortunate the way in which it's happening and everything like that. But the reality is, like, I'm just excited about like the possibilities. And it's kind of, because I think everybody on this call, and probably a lot of the participants even, you could probably, like, if you were to say like, oh, what does 20 years from now look like? If things go well for biking or whatever, you can have some idea about it. I mean, I have some good, pictures about like what infrastructure will look, because it's all inevitable too, right? Like, especially in cities, you know, when the cities, the population continues to grow, it's like the car becomes less and less viable. And so, you know, the cities need to look at that, right? And so the idea that a lot of these things are just becoming accelerated, you know, is pretty exciting to me. So it's just like all the opportunities to kind of dive into that and to help foster that. It's pretty cool to, it's kind of like a new frontier, like it's kind of, you know, like manifest destiny, all these sort of kind of crazy things. It's like, you know, it's a new life here, you know, in the cycling world, and it's exciting to participate. And you know, I think the big thing is that nothing is what it used to be, and I don't think it ever will be. So, but I love the idea of just new, like, blue ocean stuff. Like I'm all about that, and I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Love it. Adam, you. I mean, sorry to make you follow, like, you know, that, but
Totally. The biggest thing I'm looking forward to is sort of continuing the journey of learning how to slow down. I'm sure we've all been familiar that, you know, everything just started happening quickly, not only with the pandemic, but just for the past, you know, even 10, 15 years. Like, you know, you get used to trying to do everything fast, and everything's got to be faster and faster Wi-Fi and quicker response times, and, you know, eliminating one leg on a plane flight and trying to get across the country faster. Like, all of this stuff, we're just in a hurry constantly. And part of it's because I grew up in rural Montana, and I kind of really appreciate being able to genuinely unplug. But the biggest thing that I'm really going to focus on is just understanding that it's okay if it takes an hour and a half to go get groceries, if that means that I can make 3 stops and load up all the gear on my Rove and, you know, go and support the local Oriental market and go and support the local co-op, and, you know, maybe get 2 or 3 things at a time, but make 3 bike rides a week instead of going and doing 1 truckload of groceries every 2 weeks, you know, on your way home from work, when you're trying to get home and go walk the dogs or let the dogs out. And slowing down's okay, especially coming from a little bit of a racing background and stuff like that. It doesn't always have to be a target. There's not always an objective. You can just go for a bike ride. You can take your time. You don't have to push it. You don't have to start your Strava. Just go pedal, take your time. Everybody's going to get through it.
Don't have to start your Strava. That one hit me.
No, I'm kind of guilty sometimes though. Like,
yeah, well, and it's fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's fun to, you know, go through and, you know, set those PRs, you know, have a little friendly competition. The local Strava Enduros are great. Just doesn't have to be every day.
Yeah, for sure.
Love it.
What about you, Aaron?
Oh man, I was hoping I could get out of that one.
You thought so?
I think similar for me with the slowing down. I have a couple bike packing trips that I really want to do this year. Just some local ones too, where it's like just a 1 overnight, and a weekend will pass me by where I didn't really do much, and I'm like, man, I could have been out in Joshua Tree on my bike instead of just sitting on my couch. So why didn't I do that? Those are a few. I think those are a few that I want to go out and do. I love combining, you know, some camping and adventure, and just spending a night under the stars with bicycles is a pretty fantastic way to spend a day.
Sounds amazing.
So that's my goal. To do a few more of those this year. But yeah. Well, cool. I mean, Chris, Adam, thank you guys so much for joining us, lending your expertise. Justin, as always, a pleasure to just be chatting with you for an hour. We'll have to do this again sometime, but I'll send you guys the link later, but this will be up. If you're watching this in the future, we'll have some cool resources down in the description, some links to videos that Propel has done, some links to Kona's website, probably some event calendars. So check all of that out. And as always, leave us a comment. Send us a message if you have any ideas for what you want to hear us talk about, because these are for you guys as much as we enjoy them. Well, thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. Been an honor to be on with you guys. Thanks.
Yeah.